Hello, and welcome to the Surgical Assistant Podcast, a podcast crafted by surgical assistants for surgical assistants, where professionalism meets passion.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Surgical Assistant Podcast. Here we are again. I'm Kelly.
And I'm John. How are
Hey,
you?
hey, John. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Good. Hey, John, I'm going to ask you a question. One thing since we've been doing this podcast, and I've thought the worst thing, I think I figured out one of the worst things about doing a podcast. And for me, it is wondering if I mentioned everything in a podcast that I was supposed to. Like thinking back on episodes that we've done and saying, did we mention that? Did we mention that? And so I figured out that that's the worst thing about doing a podcast. What have you
Yeah.
thought of anything?
Oh, God, yeah. There's a couple of things. Being on time for the podcast is one,
I'm
as
being
you
on
can
time.
attest to, for me, anyways. Because I'll always say, hey, let's record at 2 o'clock, and then I'll send you a text. Oh, can we make it 3?
We-
How about 4, 4:35? Let's just do it at midnight. But no.
but that's the fun of doing it with
Yeah,
somebody you know well, and you've got flexible schedules, so that's fun. But
true.
once we've done that, once we've recorded a podcast, we're not gonna. You can't just keep thinking of things to say or you should have mentioned. And I'm like, gosh, I hope we're. So I
Hmm.
bring that up to tell our listeners if you listen to any of these episodes, we want your feedback. Like we
Hmm.
want comments, and you might tell us something that yeah we already thought about because we've talked about the episode that we're going to release this week, and I've already had some thoughts like I hope we mentioned this and that, and I hope what we said was helpful. So we really are trying to produce a helpful, informative podcast here. And so I certainly hope that we don't drop the ball on anything big. And so to me, that's the worst thing because I'll rehash everything that we've said and talked about. Today, we're going to be talking about traveling and basically just traveling as a first assistant 101 and talking about those basics. Before we get started with that, though, I do want to remind everyone that this is coming up in April, and we have been mentioning that here as we're recording this. Registration just opened, so hopefully you're on top of that. And by the time this episode pops out, we will be all registered, and everybody will have their reservations and be planning to go to that. So we're definitely looking forward to it, and I hope that we can get our ducks in a row to do a little broadcast from there, John, and do a little podcast clip or something. Anyway, a short video or just something. We're still working on that.
Yes, I have quite a few ideas about what we can do when we're at the conference. And just my caveat with the conference is I was surprised when I went to my first conference that there were less than 100 surgical assistants at that conference. I mean, there's probably, I don't even want to know how many just in Texas alone. I know there's 900 that are, last I checked, in the state of Virginia. There were 900 surgical assistants that were licensed, and I think 600 were resident, and the rest were people from out of state. And I would like to really see us get those numbers up because everywhere I go and I travel to places, I tell them, hey, listen, do you go to the conferences? And 9 times out of 10, they say no. And I was like, well, why
Mm-hmm.
not? I don't want to pay that much for CEUs. Okay, well, it's not just CEUs. Yes, you get CEUs, and I understand money is an issue today. I get it. But if you want to be a professional, you want to be seen as a professional, then I'm sorry, but it costs money. And it's more than just CEUs. There's people you meet, you get to network, you get to find out what's going on in the country and other people, what they're doing as surgical assistants, what kind of jobs are out there. You may even get a job. I mean, I know there's recruiters that are there from several of the big surgical assisting groups. You can network, make friends that you'll have for years going forward. I mean, some people I met at my first conference, I'm still in touch with today. And then maybe I'll see somebody that I used to work with that's now going to a conference, and it's fantastic. But it's not only the education you get from it, it's the networking, and it'll improve your practice. It will, because you'll stay up to date on these things. And I just think that's my caveat. If you want to be a
Yeah.
professional, it costs money to be a professional. And let's face it, it's not really that much. It's $275 to register for the conference. Plus, I understand you have to pay for airfare if you have to fly there. You have to pay for the hotel, which they usually do have a discounted rate. So it can get up there, but it is tax deductible because it's for your education. And some hospitals offer educational reimbursement, so why not take care of that? So I just encourage everybody to go, at least go to one, and then make up your mind from there. But don't make up your mind without going. But I'm telling you, I love them. I go to every one I can. I don't miss it because it's wonderful. And then if you can
Yeah.
afford the pre-conference workshops, it's invaluable to your practice as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my caveat. So sorry, I didn't
Yep.
mean to take
Yep.
away from
No,
your
I mean
time, Kelly, but go right ahead.
there is can't argue with the fact that there is an expense involved, but I choose to invest in myself and in my profession, and I've never regretted. I haven't once regretted spending the money to go to one of our conferences. And it's easy for us to talk about, well, we wish more were being done, and we talk about legislation being pushed and gaining the viability and the credibility in this profession in terms of getting licensed and getting the registrations and licenses, getting these states to recognize us in that way. And that's not going to happen without legislation, and that costs money. I mean, it just does to push these things forward and get them to get the bills in front of legislation or legislators. It costs money, and you're right. I mean, if we even 50% of all of the first assistants were to join and be paying dues, we could have gotten a lot more done. There's no doubt about that. It takes all of us coming together to support the profession, and we benefit in the meantime. We do benefit from like you said, knowledge and networking
Mhm.
and on all those things. So yes, we if you can't tell, we strongly encourage you
Mm.
to attend. And again, we're not being coerced into saying these things. We're just we feel passionate about it, and we just do it on our own. We believe in supporting it, and we would love for our listeners to do that as well.
I
So,
agree.
today, John, we're going to talk about traveling 101. And I have traveled some in my career. You are currently traveling and have traveled for some number of years.
I
And
have.
so
Shout
we
out to
feel
Chris.
like we, we have a little bit of experience. We're going to talk about a lot of the basics. So, if you are a first assistant and you've thought about traveling, you're considered traveling, or maybe you're just starting your travel career, this episode is going to be for you. We're going to talk about some things to consider. If you're just thinking about it, if you think, I wonder if I would enjoy traveling, I wonder what all it involved, this is going to be for you. We're just going to go over a lot of the basics here and talk about the ins and outs, ups and downs, pros and cons, and all of the little things that you don't think about when you haven't traveled. There's just things you don't know until you do it. So we're going to jump right in here. And John, we're going to talk about first and foremost some reasons that people want to travel. What are some of the best reasons that we have down?
Well, there's quite a few reasons people might want to travel just for the desire to see other places.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you've lived somewhere for a long time and your situation allows you to not be tied to a certain place. So you want to take your education and go travel as a surgical assistant. And I can tell you, traveling is an education in and of itself because surgery is regionalized just as everything else. Because the way I can tell you from personal experience, I started my career in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm currently in Virginia. I've worked in Michigan, Delaware, many states. And the way they do a gallbladder in Fort Lauderdale was different than the way they did a laparoscopic cholecystectomy in northern Michigan because they learn from wherever they went to school and then they bring it to where they end up. And it's a great way to learn new techniques, see new techniques, learn different things, it's such an education. That's one of the main reasons I love traveling. I get to learn new things and we get to meet new people. Could be an opportunity for a new job. People offer you a job if they like you and you feel like you're a good fit for that place. So there's a myriad of reasons people travel.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most common ones is money, right? People see the
Oh yeah.
pay and the rates that are being paid, and they think, "Oh, I can make so much more money traveling." And that is the case a lot of times. A lot of times that is the case. So people choose to travel for financial reasons. They choose to travel just, I mean, aside from what you said, that the experience of traveling and networking is completely big positive side to traveling, but also just to see different areas of the country. Like if
Hmm.
you've just got the travel bug and you just want to go to different places and just see some different areas and be choosy in where you're looking for assignments. If you've never been to, for instance, the Pacific Northwest, well, you're going to
Hmm.
look for assignments in Washington and Oregon and out that way. And that's a great way just to simply see different states and go to different places and work at the same time. And you can make that happen by having a job and making money while you're traveling and having fun, doing fun things. So that's definitely a great reason to do it. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, and people, everyone that is a traveler is doing it for a different reason. I would say probably the most common one is money. I mean, people
Hmm.
say money first and foremost, and we're going to talk about why you may want to consider not having that as your primary reason to travel.
It
Um,
may not be what you think it is. Yeah.
it may not be what you think it is, right? Yeah, there's just lots of things to talk about here and
Mhm.
unearth. So we're going to talk first, John, about what if I want to travel. I want to do it. I definitely want to do it. How do I get started? Like, what's the first thing you need to do?
The first thing I would say is if you have travelers at the facility you're working at now, is talk to them. Ask their experience,
Mhm.
whether they're surgical tech travelers, whether they are surgical assistant travelers or nurse travelers in the operating room, like a circulating nurse in the operating room, because the the company they work for may also work with other allied health professionals. So you may not be a nurse, but they all the travel companies, most of them, the ones I'm aware of, have travel contract for surgical assistants, surgical techs. So you can start there by asking the people you work with, hey, which company do you work for? And do you like it? And what are the good things about it? And what are the things you don't like about it? And what I usually ask the travelers, at least I did when I first started, is what do you wish you knew now what do you wish you knew then that you know now? And that's a good way to start out. But again, everybody has a different reason for traveling, like you mentioned. So one person's reason, maybe they want to get out of debt, so they're able to travel. So they just want to go somewhere, live as cheap as possible, and sock away as much as can, take as much overtime as they can just to pay off their bills, which is a valid reason. Some people may have lived all their life in northern Michigan or northern Pennsylvania and they just want to go south in the winter. And that allows you to do that as well. Some people may want to visit Hawaii, but they may want to spend 2, 3 months, 6 months in Hawaii, but go there as a traveler. That way you can offset some of your expenses. I happen to know Hawaii is expensive, so I think you may not make any money there, but you might break even and then you'll get to live for 3 months in Hawaii. So it's
Mhm.
all what you're willing to accept.
Right.
But that's the first thing I would do is I would start with the travelers that I know are travelers in my current institution before I went out there. And what about you, Kelly? What would you say to somebody?
Right. Well, that's a great point. And gathering information from people that are currently doing it. And I certainly did that. I asked people who are travelers and asked, because one of the first things you need to do is to find a company. You need to apply, right? You need to make
Mhm.
application to an agency. And so part of that information that you're gathering from other travelers is what companies are good to work with. Do you have any recommendations?
Mhm.
And so that's number one, you've got to get your application into an agency, and they're the ones that are going to handle all of the paperwork and everything to start getting you submitted to jobs, to contracts that are open. So picking an agency is a big deal. And again, you just go off of recommendations, or I mean, you could just spin the wheel and Google a travel agency, and the first one that comes up, go with that one. But you will find that they'll contact you pretty quickly after you put your information in and apply. So that is one good thing. You usually don't have to wait very long before someone's contacting you, because that's
Mhm.
their business and that's how they make their money. They make their money off of us as travelers. So they're going to be motivated to contact you and get you on board as quickly as possible. So typically you're assigned a recruiter. I mean, you do work with a recruiter, so the representative at the agency. So you have a staffing agency or travel agency that you're working with. Um, you're going to be dealing with a recruiter typically, and it's typically luck of the draw. Now, if you're talking to other travelers, that's another caveat benefit, John, to talking to other travelers. You could find if they love their recruiter, you could
Mhm.
actually get right into their recruiter and contact their recruiter
Yep.
directly, and that's a good way to jump in too. But getting the application in is the first step, and once you apply and make application, then you're going to find out, and we're here to warn you and kind of give you the heads up that you're going to find out there's so much paperwork, y'all. I mean, you're going to learn how to save your documents. You're going to learn how
Mhm.
to scan. I had to learn how to scan things and send them via email. And so you're going to, I mean, what are just some of the things they're going to want is, I mean, first of all, your life history, on your work history, all that you would normally put on an application, but they're going to want your references, your credentials, your vaccine status, your titers, I mean, gosh, you're going to have to do a drug screen, of course. The fit test and all the TB test and all those things that you have to do yearly at your facility. They're going to want all of that up front. Can you think of anything else, John, as far as, and all that, it takes
Right. But
time, time, time.
yes, and from my experience, I can tell you because I traveled first as a surgical tech back in the 90s, and I can tell you it's gotten a lot easier. I remember the first travel assignment I did, I reached out to a recruiter and they FedExed me a package and you had to literally hand fill it out and
Oh my
sign it.
gosh.
And it came with a FedEx return envelope and you FedExed it back to them. And everything was done in paperwork. Now it's much more streamlined. You could do a lot on their website. And
Mm,
honestly, I used to travel with a printer and a scanner with me, which takes up room because I needed it.
right.
Now I could do everything with my phone. I can scan documents with my phone. I can do a lot. So it's a little easier for doing that stuff, but be prepared to fill out a lot of documents.
Mhm.
Um, Once you decide on a company, like Kelly said, they will assign you a recruiter and your recruiter will talk to you and they will typically ask you a few things. Where do you want to go? What kind of money are you looking to make? What are your skills? What do you like to do? What can't you do? And be honest with them because you're only doing yourself a disservice if you lie
Mhm.
and say, I can do robotic whipples and you get there and you can't. That could be a reason they cancel your contract, honestly. I've seen it
Mhm.
happen. I was at one facility and a person showed up and they did that and they canceled our contract because they're like, we don't need you. And she was like, but I can do open heart. So like, we don't do open heart here. So if you can't do robotic cases, I don't need you. I have plenty of people that can do other cases. I need a robotics person. So robotics is hot. Get as much experience as you can, as many
Yes.
specialties. The first thing I would
Yeah.
say actually would be at least give yourself a year, probably 2 years of work experience before you try to travel. I've
Yeah,
heard of
John,
some companies taking people with less time.
I'm glad you brought that up, actually. I kinda skipped over that. So, yeah, I'm very glad you brought that up because don't graduate FA school, y'all, and then jump right into traveling. That's just not it's not beneficial to you. It's not beneficial to the facility that's going to get you. It's just not. So I agree with John. If you can,
Mhm.
the very minimum, full time first assist for a year, I would say, and make sure that you're doing a wide variety of cases in first assisting. I would say that would be a bare minimum. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yep. Typically, the areas they want you to have experience in are robotics, orthopedics, total joints,
Mm-hmm.
laparoscopy, and
Yeah.
open general cases, and maybe C sections if your hospital that
Mm-hmm.
you're traveling to
Mm-hmm.
does that. But
Mm-hmm.
once you get a recruiter, and the key is, I can only speak for myself, is trusting that recruiter absolutely
Mm-hmm.
because you have to believe what they're telling you is true about the assignment, about the rate. I mean, I could probably, as many travelers as there are, each one has a story of recruiters that are dishonest. But personally, I've never met one. I've heard horror stories from travelers,
I haven't
but
had any terrible experiences either. Thank goodness, knock on wood.
exactly.
But
Now, in full disclosure, I have to be honest. Most of my recruiters I've gotten from Kelly because Kelly's had such great recruiters.
mm,
I've had, hey, who's your recruiter? And I've worked with several of her recruiters in the past, and they've been as advertised. But that's the key is trusting your recruiter, and you can get that by talking to them. You
mm-hmm.
can generally, if somebody sounds like a car salesman, I kind of try to stay away from them because I think
Yeah,
they're have their own interests at heart and not mine.
yeah,
I mean, at the end of the day, everybody has to earn a living, and I understand that. But
yeah.
having trust is the key. And I've trusted all my recruiters, and I believe what they tell me that the rate is the rate. So
Mm-hmm.
that's key. And then
Yeah,
once you start working with your recruiter, then you'll get your packet. Once your whole profile is complete, then they will tell you, well, I have this, and this assignment in this, and this place. And then you'll say,
mm-hmm.
okay, submit me to that one, but not to this one, and then that's how it'll go. And then typically they'll submit you out. And then Kelly, do you want to describe to them the next step after that? Typically, once you get submitted to an assignment.
Yeah, yeah, I do. First, I do want to be transparent, and I'm just going to mention a few of the companies I've worked with and
Hmm.
for, and have not had any problems with any of these. I've done assignments with AYA, that's AYA, MedPro, AMN, and One Staff. I've done assignments with all of those companies. I don't have anything bad. Again, I personally think it boils down to more of your recruiter and how honest they are. And I have had one recruiter with one of those companies that did remind me of a car salesman, and it was so funny to hear him talk. But when it came down to it, my assignment with that company was not affected by that. I usually suggest to people that are looking at traveling, I suggest that they get profiles with more than one company. um,
Hmm.
I myself don't want to have my I don't want to be applied and in the system of more than I would say 3 at max. I usually don't go more than 2 at a time
Mhm.
because I will interject this here. These travel companies, gosh, without going into too much of the structure, because I'm not even a professional in that manner, but there are vendors. There are vendors. If you think of the vendor as being the umbrella, and there's a vendor, and under that umbrella of that vendor, there can be 3 different companies, and those
Mhm.
companies are all under that vendor. So what you will run into if you're applied or you're working with more than one company, then you've got to keep up with what jobs you've been submitted to by that company because you don't want really any crossover. Like I don't want to be applied with one staff and MedPro, for instance, and be submitted to jobs that both of those companies have contracts with. Does that make sense? That's it
Yep.
just gets convoluted and you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't tell MedPro to submit you to a job and Aya to submit you to the same job. I mean, you don't do that.
Correct.
So
Right.
that's something important to know. So if you are going to have trouble keeping up with what vendors, like Health Trust is a vendor, and under Health Trust, there's different companies that operate under their vendorship. So it sounds complicated, but we're here to let you know these things so that you kind of have an idea. Oh, it is important that I keep those separate, those jobs separate. So um, just something to be aware of there. But
Mhm.
once you're applied and you've got your profile, like John said, and you start getting submitted, you say, "Yep, there's a assignment in Nashville." You're usually able to see where the assignment is and how much it's paying per week. And if those two things are acceptable to you, then you say, "Yes, I'm interested in going there." And the recruiter will submit you to that facility for that job. Typically, if they are interested in your profile and they look at you, then you'll typically get a call from the manager, the hiring manager of the OR department. And that's when you have an opportunity to kind of do that one on one interview with the manager and really get some more details about the job. I always recommend be transparent, be yourself. Do not try
Mhm.
to misrepresent your experience. It's certainly okay to say, no, you know what? I have not had an opportunity to do a lot of neuro cases, but I love to learn and all of my fundamentals are in place. And so that I'm able to go into a case and learn from the surgeon and learn from the staff. So I've said that in
Mhm.
interviews. Don't misrepresent. Don't say you have neuro cranny experience when you don't, because you don't want to be that
Mhm.
person. Again, guys, that's not safe for the patient. It's not good for the hospital that's getting you because you're lying to them and making them think they're getting something they're not. It's not good for you. It's not going to look good on you either.
Mhm.
So, all around, best idea is just to be honest and upfront. John, have had to tell managers before when they've on this manager interview when
Mhm.
they say, "Listen, we are heavy in ortho. We do tons of ortho. We might do 1 or 2 robots a week in general surgery. You might do some urology cases, but we really are heavy in ortho." I stop them right there and say, "Ortho is not my strong suit. That's not my wheelhouse, and also it's not really something that I want to get more experience in." I don't say it like that, but I just say it doesn't sound like it's going to be a good fit for me. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't like ortho. I don't love
Mhm.
it. Now, when I get assigned to an ortho case, do I want to do a great job? Yes, I do. Do I want to know what I'm doing? Yes, I do. But it's not my favorite genre. So, of course, if I hear that they're heavy in ortho, that's not going to be a good fit for me, right? And it's okay to say that. And I've hung up with managers and had and I've actually had more than one manager say, "We appreciate you being honest about that." So, have you ever had that experience in doing
Oh,
interviews?
exactly. Yes, I have. And that is paramount is to be honest about your skills. Because, like I said
Mhm.
before, I've seen people get their contracts canceled because they misrepresented themselves. And you don't want to do that to yourself. This is a small community, word travels. But not only that, they may only need you for one contract right now, but who knows? There might come another
Mhm.
contract when they
Right.
where they might need somebody and you can get submitted to it again and they see your name and like, "Oh, yeah, I've seen that person before. They
Mhm.
were really good." You don't
Mhm.
want them to see your profile and say, "Oh, yeah, well, they lied and said they couldn't do this, that, and the other thing and or
Right.
misrepresented that." So, just be honest. Honesty, I can't tell you is the best policy. And if I could just speak for myself, I have a lot of experience in a lot of different specialties, but I do not have that much in robotic urology. I have some in
Mhm.
urogyne, and I have some in like nephrectomies and things like that. But robotic prostatectomies, I've done too. And I'm always
Mhm.
honest with places like that. Like the place I'm at right now, I told them that right up front in the interview. And they're like, well, we don't have urology here, so it's not a problem. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
there you go. So I just encourage you to be honest. And don't get dazzled by the number. Think, oh, that pays so much better than anything else. I'm going to say whatever I have to get that job because believe me, it'll show later on when you get there.
Oh, yeah, for
And it may
sure.
not go unnoticed. You think they don't notice, but they trust me, they notice.
Oh, they
And so that's what Kelly says. And as far as
yeah.
the structure, the way I understand it, it's like you said, there you have vendors, which are vendor management companies. In the old days, it used to just be whatever travel company submitted your profile directly to the OR manager of whatever hospital needed you. And now these vendor management companies have insinuated themselves, or I shouldn't
Mhm.
say that. They've developed a role in the process now where they get your profile, they get it together, they get everything in a row, and they submit it to whatever hospital. So now an OR manager only has to deal with one or two vendor management companies instead of 40 or 50 recruiters.
Right.
Unfortunately, the downside to that is the vendor management company takes 2 to 4% of that contract, so that kind of lowers the overall number, but it's
Mhm.
just the nature of the beast. So,
Right.
but there are vendor management companies, so that's a little bit more on the structure of that. But typically, yeah, as Kelly said, they will reach out to you if they want to speak to you more, find out more, maybe offer you the job. They will call for a phone interview, and typically
Mhm.
they will always call you while you're working.
Mm.
So, I mean, they understand you're a traveler, so you might be on an assignment. I just tell them, hey, can I call you at lunch or can we make up a time tomorrow? Or if
Mhm.
you work 410s, can I call you on my day off? So
Right.
typically that's how it goes. So,
Right, and I tell people on this, you're not the only one being interviewed. I'm interviewing them as well, right? I mean, because you want,
of
like I
course.
said a minute ago, you want to make sure this is a good fit for you. You want to make sure that it's going to be a good thing because
Hmm.
no matter how much money it is, 13 weeks can be a very long time if you are in a miserable situation. And trust me, they exist. Miserable situations exist. Hear me loud and clear. And that 13 weeks will drag by and be miserable. And who knows what would all be involved in that. So yeah, don't let the money, like John said, don't let the money be the only thing that you're looking at. You do want to interview that manager as well and have some questions lined up because they're going to say, "Do you have any questions for me?"
Hmm.
Um, what are some questions? Let's move into that segment. What are some things we want to consider
That's a
about
good
this
point.
assignment? So first and foremost, while we've got that manager on the phone, we can ask them some questions. How much call am I going to be expected to take? That's a big one that
Hmm.
I just did not know to ask when I first started. Of course, I know that call is going to be involved, but I just took it like, Kelly, of course you're going to be on call. So I didn't even think to ask any questions. Is what is my call gonna be like? Am I going to be on call 3 nights a week and every other weekend? What is it going to look like? So that's a big one to ask them. And I also, if they haven't already mentioned it, I do ask the mix of cases that they do, the case
Hmm.
types that they do. Another one that is my priority to ask John, and I feel like it would be for you too, is how are your first assistants utilized there?
Hmm.
Like what does a typical day in the life of one of your first assistants look like? If you're lucky, you get to interview with a first assistant, maybe a lead first assistant there, and so then they can really answer those questions also. But what are some questions you like to ask the manager?
Typically, what you've asked, I have a list of questions that I keep with me that I ask when they do call for the phone interview because they, like you said, they will ask you that. Do you have any questions for me? And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I ask. How many first assistants do you have? How much call is required? Do you require me to take call? Because I've been to some assignments that didn't require I take call, but I asked if I could take call because I look at it as well. They're bringing in a traveler. They're busy. I'd like to give their native staff a break so they don't burn out. So I like to get into that call mix. Some places have a very aggressive call schedule, some don't. Just depends on how many first assistants they have.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask them questions like, what's the housing like in your area? Is it expensive? Do you have any housing suggestions? I've asked, how long have you been using travelers? I'll ask, like you said, what's a typical day in the life of a traveler? But for me, as a surgical first assistant, the biggest question I ask and I get out of the way right up front is, do you require me to scrub cases?
It's a great one.
And to
Yep,
me,
that's
that
a
is a
great
huge
one.
question because
Mm-hmm.
and I'll tell you right now, it's a misnomer in the industry, but every job you'll see says surgical tech first assistant,
Yeah.
even though there is no such thing, as far as
Right.
I know, as a surgical tech first assistant. You're either a surgical tech or you're a first assistant.
Mhm.
Now, many of us got to become first assistants through being a surgical tech, but there are people
Mhm.
that don't. So
Right.
there are people that don't know how to scrub cases because they've never been a scrub tech. So
Right.
that's a big question I ask because I got bit my very first contract. So I've been
Mhm.
always, and I don't want to misrepresent them. I haven't scrubbed in a long time and I just wouldn't be any good at it, to be honest with you. And it's not something I want to do. Very frankly, it's not something I want to do anymore. I've done it. I did it for 25 years and I enjoyed it. I was very good at it. I loved it, but I wanted to move on. I wanted more responsibility. I wanted to be more involved in patient care. And I love what I do today.
Mhm.
So I make sure I get that out of the way. And then I discuss that. And because I've been turned down from jobs because I didn't scrub, and that's okay. That's not what I
Mhm.
want to do. Maybe somebody out there will, and that's a good job for them. So
Right. And I
that's a
have
big
too. I've
question
turned
I get
down
away.
Yep, and I've turned down jobs or gotten told on the phone, "Oh, well, we don't." Oh, also along those lines, John, I've been
Mm,
submitted for positions that, well, okay, I know this happened once. This happened at least one time. They were interviewing for a CST,
okay.
not a first assistant at all. So clarify, yes, clarify at the
Yes.
beginning of that conversation that this is for a first assistant. Oh, I'm glad I thought of that because that could have been because she was asking me, can you do this case, this case, this case? And was like, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Mhm,
And then I don't know how it came about. I don't know how we figured out. And I said, oh, wait, maybe I did ask the question, do I need to scrub? And she was like, what?
mhm,
But I was interviewing, she wanted a scrub tech. She wanted a CST. And I was like, oh, I am so sorry. My company must have made a mistake and submitted me for the wrong job. And so I had to go back and tell my recruiter. So we got off the phone pretty quick. And
mhm.
I had to tell my recruiter that that was not a first assistant job. So definitely make sure you're interviewing for the right position
Yes, and that goes back
there
to
as
picking the
well.
right recruiter because you want a recruiter
Mm-hmm.
that understands the difference between a surgical tech and a surgical first assistant. Not all
Mm-hmm.
of them do,
And
but it's
sometimes
getting
they are
better.
listed wrong. I mean,
That's true
sometimes
too.
they're listed
That is
wrong,
true.
and it's not anybody's fault. It just got listed wrong, and there
Mhm,
you are interviewing for a job that you're not going to take because you're not
mhm,
qualified for it. Um, so yeah, so I just want to reiterate to everyone, use that as have those questions in your mind. What are some of important things? And it's going to be variable. Some of the things that John mentioned, maybe you don't care about. Some of the things that I mentioned, maybe you don't care about. But think of the things that you do care about and prepare to have those questions for that manager. I've never interviewed with a manager that wasn't helpful in
mhm,
telling me where I might want to look for a house,
mm,
or housing, where I don't want to live. I love it when I go someplace and they're so helpful with don't look in this area, you want to stay away from that area, and how far away certain places are. Um so this and that just segues us into the another thing that we want to consider for these assignments. You want to consider the housing
mhm.
situation. And
True.
I know nowadays housing has just gone through the roof, and so that cuts into your pay, the what you're going to have to pay for housing. But in addition to that call amount, how much call are you going to have to take, or do they expect you to take? You also want to make sure that you mention any time off during that 13-week contract that you're going to need. Go ahead and tell the manager, say, listen, I've got a vacation coming up this date to this date that I'm going to have put in my contract. I like to tell you that up front so that if there's any conflict, maybe you can look at that now and know, especially if it's a deal breaker for you. Like if it's something that you know can be changed and it's not a big deal, that's one thing. But if it's like a family vacation, you've already got these cruise tickets or you've got plane tickets or concert tickets or whatever that you can't, retract on, you need to know ahead of time that you can get that time off, and you kind of want to be honest with them about that too. Um, the housing,
I agree, and I've
health insurance costs for a company is a big deal too. Go ahead, John.
no, no, I said agree with that. Now, a lot of recruiters are getting better about asking you when you ask to get submitted to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing I'd like to bring up. I forgot to mention before is I always tell my recruiters, do not submit me to an assignment without asking me first. I mean, some want to be
Oh,
helpful and they see an assignment open up
mm-hmm.
and they immediately send their profile out because they want to get you a job for
Yeah.
whatever reason. But most of them care because they want you to get a job. I mean, that's why you're with
Mm-hmm.
them. So, but I always tell them, listen, don't submit me to that job or this job or whatever ask me first because, like Kelly said, it's a good idea to get listed with a few different companies because some companies get God, I can't talk today, exclusive contracts that
Right.
other travelers don't, travel companies don't get with hospitals. So, and you do not want to be submitted by two separate companies to the same contract because it
Right.
will nullify you for that. Or you may
It
have to
will.
send a letter saying, please retract this one from this company. And this is the one I meant to go with. It was a
Yeah.
mistake. If that keeps happening, they
Yeah.
just won't look at you anymore. That I could tell you
Yeah,
that for
that's
sure.
important. That is important. And
Mhm.
we do want you to hear that kind of loud and clear because that was another thing I was not aware of when I started.
Yep,
Um,
me
so
neither.
yeah,
But
so let
housing,
yeah, let's talk about housing for a minute because that's a big one.
sure. For,
Typically, when we're traveling, we're maintaining a house somewhere else. Like you've got a full-time house, you might have a significant other, you might have a significant other and children at home. You might have just kids at home that are old enough to stay by themselves. Whatever your situation, you're going to have a place to live. And this is another thing we want to kind of let you know about that number, that per week pay number, the pay per week number. There are some things that are going to have to come out of that. Housing is definitely one of them. You got to have a place to live. So there are resources. We probably don't need to go into all the little tit and tat resources that are available. Most people know about Furnish Finders, Airbnb, there's hotel suites, there's just plain old asking around for housing. The bottom line here is it's going to cost you some money. So, kind of doing some research before you even get submitted for a position in a city is kind of do your homework and see what the housing is going to run you, what the average is. Housing has gotten crazy right now at the time we're recording this. I don't see it going way back down because apparently people are getting what they're charging. I mean, to me, I don't know. Back several years ago, to think of paying $900 or $1,000 a month for a room, a bedroom in someone's house and a bathroom inside someone's house, not a separate area, would have was insane to me. But nowadays, that's the norm. I mean, that's kind of normal wherever you're going on an assignment. So, research. I've found rental housing situations from Craigslist. I've been very lucky and I've used Craigslist a time or two in Nashville. Specifically, I've looked on Airbnb and most recently on my most recent assignments, I've used Furnish Finders. But scams are everywhere. Scams are everywhere. Just be alert, be careful, be cognitive of who you're talking to and what you're looking at there. Do you have any? You've got more recent experience. It's been over a year since I had to do that. But how do you find your housing, John?
well, for housing, typically, I've gotten one assignment housing through speaking to the nurse manager. I said, "Do you have any suggestions on where I should look for housing?" She goes, "Oh, there's a nurse here that rents out as an apartment for
Excellent.
rent."
Mm-hmm.
So I've gotten housing that way. Typically, there, like Kelly said, there are a lot of resources, and she mentioned them. Furnish Finders, Travelers Haven is another one. There's a bunch out there. Airbnb, VRBO, and just because it doesn't show that the dates are available that you need to be there, I always send an email directly to the landlord or the owner or whatever saying, "Hey, listen, I'm a healthcare traveler. I'm taking an assignment at such and such a hospital. Would you be willing to rent to me for a different rate? Would you drop it down for a monthly rate? Because a nightly
Mm-hmm.
rate, 250 a night for whatever, might be their nightly rate because they're kind of averaging, okay, well, it doesn't get filled this many days, so I need to offset it by
Mm-hmm.
charging this much. But if they know you're going to be there for 90 days, then
Mm-hmm.
they can lower the price down to something that you may be able to afford.
Right.
So I just always try that. Craigslist, I don't try Craigslist anymore. There's just too many scams on Craigslist. The rule of thumb with housing is if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never gone wrong with Furnish Finders, and I'm always honest with the housing people as well. So now, when I first started traveling, I mean, there's two ways you can travel. They can find you housing,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have to pay for housing, but then again, you don't get paid as much money either. And if you're completely at a loss, you don't know how to find housing, you don't want to deal with it, then maybe that might be the way to go for your first
Mm-hmm.
assignment. But you have to make up your mind for that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can tell you is Kelly's right. I mean, I'm not going to pay $850 for a room in somebody's house per month. That's me. I mean, I don't want a roommate. I do not want a roommate. At my age, I want my own space. I don't want to have to fight for the bathroom. I don't want to have to worry about who else is there, about the kitchen. If I get up at 4 in the morning to go to work, I don't want to worry about disturbing other people. That's just me. Somebody else who's
Mm-hmm.
26 might not care. Another female landlord, you guys might get along great and do girl stuff. That's whatever. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's another benefit of traveling.
And
But
if
for
there's one
me, I
thing you
always look
find
for
out
private housing.
And if
Yeah,
there's one
but
thing you find out really quick, it's your hard line of where you're gonna what your housing requirements are for yourself. That's for sure. You find
exactly.
out real quick
I'm
what you
sure
will and will not put up with. So,
every traveler has that, and I'm not gonna go
yeah.
into it now. Someday maybe we will. We'll have a story time, but I did that on one assignment. They asked me if I wanted a roommate, and I said, "You know what? That might be a good idea. A chance to meet somebody in the same
Uh-oh.
profession, to make a friend." It was a
And
disaster.
it was a disaster. Okay.
Oh
Well,
my god.
I will give a
So never
short
again.
interjection. My first travel assignment I did, and I'm gonna because sometimes you have to think out of the box. I mean, you do when it comes to think out of the box. Like, don't listen to we're what we're telling you or what other travelers have told you. You got to find customized situations to fit yourself. So, one real quick example is I had been a first assistant for a little over 2 years when I decided to travel, and usually I'll go back to that application process. When you're getting submitted for a job, they really want to see that you've traveled before, don't they, John? I mean,
That's true, yeah.
and but there's a first travel assignment for everybody. Since I wasn't a very diverse first assistant right away, even though I had been done it 2 years, I had only done vascular essentially for those 2 years. I wanted to jump into traveling. I did take a scrub tech position. Actually, it wasn't really even a scrub tech position. It was an OB tech position in California, in Santa Barbara. So my recruiter told me once you do this, if you do this assignment, it doesn't matter what you did on the assignment. You've got a travel resume then. So your
Mm,
travel resume will have started, and from then on, future jobs are going to say, "Oh, you've traveled before." So that's what I heard. Actually, that turned out to be pretty good advice. I did 2 contracts there
mm,
in Santa Barbara in that labor and delivery department, and that was great because the location was fantastic. But I knew housing was going to be really expensive. It's California. I mean, it's an expensive
mhm,
part of California. And I did have my company set me up with housing. I was set up, and so that brought down my pay, but I could still make it. I mean, it was fine. I wasn't losing money, but especially from what I was making in the state I was working in right then. So I was still in the black on that. Anyway, I had them set me up with housing. It was a nice apartment complex, very safe area. It was beautiful. And they set me up. I got some rental furniture. They dropped some rental furniture in the house. They did it for me. Got them necessities, a bed and a couple of nightstands and a couch, a sofa to sit on. And I did that for some weeks there, like maybe I want to say a couple of months. But once I got into that job and was working, I met a nurse. There was an older nurse there that was single. Her kids were grown and out of the house. And I ended up renting from her. So I was able to go to my company and say, I found somebody to rent from. Anyway, it all worked out that I was able to get out of that apartment early and transition to renting a room in her house. It was an upstairs bedroom and bathroom to myself. Perfect situation. So you don't ever know what you're going to run into. And as a matter of fact, I kind of tell people when they're first starting, like at least do that, have your company do it, or just go to a generic hotel, like a suite hotel situation where you've got the kitchenette in the room and all that. And have it in your mind that you're going to do that for a couple of weeks until you get your bearings and get the lay of the land and figure out the
mhm.
area, especially for a female. Figure out the area, talk to people at work, see if anybody, I mean that was perfect the way that worked out for you. That nurse had that apartment that she rented out. You don't ever know what the situation's going to be. But I
It's true.
told all that to say, think out of the box. Think of some different
Mhm,
ways you can finagle it and make it work for you. And I fully believe that it's smart to go in somewhere and get used to it first before you even
mhm.
sign a contract for any housing.
It's true.
That's
That's
probably
a
the
good
smarter
point,
way to go on that.
because you wanna get stuck into a place in housing where you're not making money because it's so expensive, or it costs
Mhm.
more and you're losing
Mhm.
money for that gig.
Right.
That is a fantastic point, and I've done that before too. I've had stayed at there's several suite hotels. Extended Stay America is one of them. Homewood Suites, I think Microtel has some. There's a ton of them,
Mhm.
and Candlewood Suite. I mean, different hotels in different parts of the country. If I can't find housing before I get to an assignment, that's my fallback. And
Mhm.
I've stayed in those places 9 months at an assignment. It was a good place. It was inexpensive. It worked.
Mhm.
But then I've also seen it where in certain areas it's incredibly expensive too, and you're probably better off
Mhm.
finding an apartment rather than staying in a place like that. Also, you have to consider the area in which you're doing too.
Mhm.
And there's resources that you can do where you can search the crime statistics in that area of where you're going so you can figure it out. And that's
Mhm.
the other thing too. That's the benefit of doing the interview typically with the nurse manager. And if you're a surgical first assistant, they usually have the lead SA in on it. Ask them, what places should I avoid in housing? Where's not a good place to stay? What are the bad parts of town? Because
Mhm.
I've done assignments in bigger cities and they said, oh, stay away from this area, stay away from that area. So that's another benefit. And there was one assignment that I wanted to take in northern Michigan, but it was a resort area, very expensive. But in the
Mhm.
wintertime, it was affordable because nobody wants to be there in the wintertime. They get a ton of snow, but I love that kind of stuff. So I waited till the winter came around and I was able to find affordable housing. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, don't be afraid to think outside the box. Try.
Right.
There's many different areas, and I'm not gonna belittle y'all. You're smart enough. I mean, I've looked at places where I could find housing much cheaper 30 minutes down the road as opposed to where I was. But then I had to factor in, well, that's gas every day back and forth. Call, you have to usually be within a 20-minute window of the hospital if you do C-sections, 30 if you don't do C-sections. And I've been at places where you had an hour response time, but those are rare. So that's something you need to keep in consideration too. Always find
Absolutely.
out how close it
Yeah.
is to the hospital. You don't want to find a great place that's super cheap and you're an hour away. That's
Right.
useless. So, but
Right. And
y'all
what
are
your
adults, you
drive
can
time
figure
is,
that out.
because I've learned that 10 miles doesn't sound long, but if depending on what area you are, 10 miles can take 45 minutes to drive.
Yep.
So it just depends.
There's
That
ways
was a
around
good
that
point.
too. I mean, if it's incredibly cheap and it works out, then maybe if you don't take call all that often, you could stay at a hotel or a
Mhm.
motel close to the hospital for those nights you're on
Mhm.
call. I don't recommend that, but maybe you can. But for ladies, especially if ladies traveling alone, you need to worry about your security. That
Yeah.
is something. I wasn't going to mention this, but I am going to mention this. Whenever I travel and I find housing, I have little things that I do for my safety. One of them is I bought a thing that detects hidden cameras. So that's the first
Mhm.
thing I do. I turn off all the lights and I use this device to find hidden cameras or hidden wireless microphones because I've heard horror stories as well. And we've all seen them on Instagram or TikTok or whatever your social media addiction is. But that's something you need to seriously, seriously consider. The
Mhm.
area, trust your gut. If you get a bad feeling from somebody, from a landlord, trust it. There's plenty of other housing out there, or maybe this assignment just isn't worth it. So I would recommend that. There's plenty of things you can find on Amazon that are inexpensive that you can use to detect hidden cameras.
Mhm.
That's one thing I do. I always bring things for my own security. On Amazon, you can buy them in a pack of 1 to 4. They're little door stops, but they have an alarm. So it works as a doorstop, but as soon as the door opens and touches it, a really loud alarm goes off. So it gives you that notice should anybody come in your room. Now, if you're renting a room from somebody, you can still use that because no
Mhm.
one should be coming in your room. That's your private space. So there's just some
Yeah.
things like that, and we can maybe highlight that in a future episode on some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But there are
Yeah.
devices out there, but take your security first. Make sure that if you're driving a vehicle, that it's going to be safe, parked in that area, and nobody's going to break into it. You can do crime statistic researches in any country, any city in this country, and you can find it. Property crimes, strong arm crimes. They list them by all different kinds.
Mhm.
So, and I would honestly recommend for anybody traveling, carry pepper spray with you.
Mhm.
It's legal in all 50 states, as far as I know. It's less lethal, not non lethal, but it is less lethal and it'll buy you some time. So, it's
Mhm.
something that you might want to consider. Want to really turn the podcast in that direction, but I think it needs to
Yeah,
be brought
no,
up,
I'm glad
especially
you
for young
mentioned it.
ladies traveling by
Yes.
themselves.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely important. And it's an element of traveling. I mean, you're typically by
Hmm.
yourself, and yep. And bad things have happened to
Hmm.
single travelers. I've heard and known personally of stories that very unfortunate and tragic, to be frank. So that's
Hmm.
a reality that we live in, John, and that we're in, and you've got to be careful and alert. And those are great tips. Just some cons, maybe some downside of traveling. We want to talk about that money, that price tag per week. I mean, just as a matter of example, if I see a job for an FA at $2,500 a week right now, know off the bat that's going to take, by the time you take your taxes, health insurance if you need it, most people do, and housing. And I use $1,000 a month housing in this example. That is the low end, I feel like, right now
Hmm.
of housing, at least what I've looked at. So we know that you're going to pay taxes, you're going to have health insurance, and you're going to have housing. right off the bat, that drops that 2,500, and 2,500 a week is your blended rate, right? You have a taxable per hour amount, and then you have your stipends that are non-taxable grouped in there. I'm sorry, but 2,500, I'm using that blended rate just for simplicity here. So that automatically, just those three things drops that rate down to 1,800 a week. And now you're going to have to obviously gas, food, sightseeing, whatever else you're spending money on, doubling your expenses at home. By doubling expenses, housing is a doubled expense, food is a doubled expense, so those kind of things, and some other things they're variable. But so all I did was subtract the things that we know are going to be taken out. So automatically that drops it down to 1,800 a week, and depending on where you live and what kind of full-time staff rates you can get with your on-call pay, it might not be worth it for you to travel. You might have to say, well, I need to wait, or it's a good idea to know what kind of rate you're looking at that'll make it worth it, because another downside of traveling is homesick. I mean, you're by yourself. You miss your
Mm,
home. You miss your people. That happens. You have to have some good coping mechanisms. Thank God for FaceTime and this technology we have. You can talk to your loved ones and people you care about. On the flip side of that, I would say a pro is you're meeting new people. You're making
mm.
new friends. You're having new connections. You're seeing new places. So, there's a pro to every con I can list. John, have you ever known anybody, or have you ever gone on a travel assignment without a car before and not had a car?
Yes, I have. I took an assignment in Wisconsin during the wintertime. I lived in Florida and I had a convertible. So, but
Oh,
I talked to
that
the owner. It was actually a smaller travel company. Great, great guy out of Rice Lake, Wisconsin. Excellent company. I've heard nothing but good things about him. That's how I found him. And I explained to him the situation, and he was able to find for me an apartment directly across the street from the hospital. But I'll tell
wow.
you, I spent most of my life, 12 years of it in Connecticut and then the rest of it in Florida, and 45 degrees below zero is cold.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I grew up in South Florida. I
Okay.
did not have winter clothes per se, but I went and bought some before I went there. But even the 15-minute walk it took me, I was almost frozen by the time I got there. So I
Mm,
eventually bought the correct clothes. But yes, I was able to do a travel assignment without a car.
wow.
And you can do that in some bigger cities like New York City. I
Mm-hmm.
would not recommend taking a car to New York
Right.
City. Maybe Chicago. I've never been to Chicago, but although I do want to visit. But yeah, you can do it without a car. And he was kind enough. I mean, he went and picked me up at the airport. He said it's easier to fly into this airport instead of this airport. And he came and got me. But nowadays
Wow.
things are so much easier with Uber. But if you're going to Uber to an assignment, that gets to be pricey, and that's going to cut into your money.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely, but there are jobs that can do it, and it worked out. It worked out great.
Yeah. So, it's another
So
thing to
you
consider.
could do it. It's not ideal, but it can be done. But like Kelly said, there are downsides to traveling. One thing is rates can drop, and we're seeing that right now. Rates have precipitously dropped since my last assignment, and some of them just aren't. It's not worth it for me to take some of them
Mm-hmm.
because it's just not. The rate is too much, but housing hasn't changed much. So like Kelly said, that cuts into your bottom line. And let's face it, I mean, you're traveling, you're supposed to be duplicating expenses, which means you have rent or mortgage at home that you're paying. That's why your housing and food is not taxed. That's the
Mm-hmm.
benefit. And I am serious when I say this. Be honest with your taxes and everything because the last thing you want to get is audited. And that's why I don't mess around when it comes to taxes. I pay my
Mm-hmm.
taxes on time. There's other ways to do it. I mean, there's other travel companies that will offer you a 1099 offer of employment where they pay you and it may seem like a lot of money, but now you've got to take your housing out of that, you got to take your taxes out
Mm-hmm.
of that, you got to take your insurance out of that because those companies
Mm-hmm.
typically don't provide any of that. You may get dazzled by this huge high number, but at the end, it works out to just be average that every other company is paying because now you have to front those expenses. You have to take
Mm-hmm.
enough money out to make sure that you'll be covered in taxes. So I don't go for those type. They're not for me. I know people who have and have done well at them because they chose the right gig, but at the end of the day, it's all in what you're willing to put up with.
Right, right. So fluctuating rates is a
Hmm.
big downer, because like we find out in reality too, when the housing market goes up, your job isn't saying, "Oh, here, let's pay you more money because housing has gone up."
Right.
Well, in this situation, rates can actually go down. Pay rates can go down and housing stays the same. So I'm looking at some of the rates out there now, John, and I'm like, "Ooh, I'm
Hmm.
glad I'm not traveling
Yep.
right now." I mean, it's not good,
Yep.
but doable. And depending on what
Hmm.
your situation is, where I would never discourage somebody, but for me, it's not worth it to leave my house and go sleep in somebody else's bed or another bed for not, I really wouldn't be making much more money than I'm making here, getting to be at home and working and just doing my thing here. So that's a individual thing, and but
Mhm.
rates have gone down significantly. You're right, and
Yep.
hopefully they'll come back up. But we have seen this before. I mean, we've seen rates go down
Mhm.
and then spike back up. So hopefully it would resolve and come back up. But
And rates do fluctuate given the time of the year too. Like I said,
mhm,
most northern assignments tend to pay a little bit more in wintertime because they need to attract those people because everybody wants to go south rather than going
mhm,
to northern Michigan, North Dakota, Wyoming,
right,
places like
that's
that
true.
maybe somebody's not a big fan of winter, but it does say so. I guess I would say, Kelly, so now let's say you've gotten all that in place, you've gotten your assignment, you're on it, and now what? Typically, most assignments are 13 weeks at a
Mhm,
time, but you may find one that's 26 weeks. I've seen them out there. I've never taken one.
mhm.
What are your options then as your 13-week assignment is coming to an end? Kelly, when do you typically start looking for another assignment as yours is coming to an end?
I felt most comfortable at 5 weeks, like 5, 6 weeks. So essentially, halfway through the assignment, you kind of have a good feel if they're going to need you to extend or if they've asked you to extend at that point. If you don't know, if you have no idea whether they're going to need you again, or if you're even if you know you're not interested in extending, then go ahead and by all means contact your recruiter and say, this is when I'm going to be ready to start my next job, my next contract. Let's start looking. If you do want to stay and they haven't mentioned it yet, go ahead and ask the manager, hey, do you have any idea if you're going to need me to stay past this contract or if you'd be interested in having me? There's nothing wrong with that. So just kind of assessing the situation about halfway through. I usually like
Mhm.
5 or 6 weeks out from the end of my contract is when I was felt comfortable starting to look. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Typically for me, it's about 4 weeks out because most
Mhm.
places want you to start within 2 weeks. And it
Mhm.
takes time to do all that stuff because once you get an offer from a hospital, let's say you found a job, they submitted you to it, you did the interview, you got the word from your recruiter, hey, great, they want to hire you. So then typically you've got to do all the medical stuff. You've got to get a urine test, you've got to get a TB test, which is now typically a quantiferon test. They want a lot of different paperwork. So you get all that done, that's done, and now it comes up to the end of your assignment and you're I've been on assignments that are so busy, honestly, the OR manager didn't have time to track when my contract
Mhm.
ends, and that's not
Mhm.
their fault. They're just busy.
Right.
And so what I typically do is if I didn't hear anything, I'll ask them, like you said, hey, do you want to extend? If that somehow slips through the cracks, I get an offer from somewhere else, I'll go to them first. If I'm interested in staying there, if it's an assignment that I really want to stay on longer, I'll say, hey, listen, my recruiter submitted me to another contract. I got an offer, but do you need me to stay here? Because I like it here. I wouldn't mind extending. I'm not using this as a bargaining tool, but I just want to be honest with you that I'm considering other offers. And they'll either say
Mhm.
yes or no, or if you want to. So that's something I
Yeah.
do from time to time as well. But typically, I've usually do an assignment and an extension. It makes it easier for 6 months, and that's something I
Mhm.
get. Also, you want to consider upfront in housing too if it's an Airbnb situation or something, but I always ask them, hey, listen, I may be asked to extend. Could I possibly be able to stay here for 6 months? If that,
Mhm.
because if it's an Airbnb, they say, no, I've got my summer locked up. Like that
Yeah.
place I was talking about in northern Michigan. I spoke to the landlord about that, and she said you can stay up until the weekend before Labor Day, but I am booked solid for the rest of the year after Labor Day. So
It's a good
don't even
point.
try.
That's
Or
a
excuse
very
me,
good point.
Memorial
Yeah.
Day.
Mm.
Don't even try after Memorial Day. I'm booked solid. So, and
Mhm.
she was kind enough to lower the rate during the wintertime because she knew the hospital there needed travelers and she wanted to give them a break. So, I mean,
Yeah,
it was
nice.
really
That's a
ideal,
good. Yeah.
but that is something you consider. Your
Mhm.
housing, you might need it for 6 months. You might need it for 9 months. I mean, it might ask you again
Mhm.
because you're allowed to
Right.
stay on an assignment up to just short of a year. You
Mhm.
don't want to hit anything more than I don't stay there on an assignment more
I'm
than nine
confused
months.
about the ins and outs and that. I'm not even
Yeah,
gonna
me too.
launch into this discussion because we'll have travelers
Right,
listen to this that will comment, and fine, we want you to. It's okay to
right.
comment and say, "Oh no, I was at this one place 2 years. I
Yep.
was at a John, I
I've
did
heard
an
people say
assignment
that
in
too.
Michigan, and there was a
Yep.
traveler there. He was a traveler first assistant, and he'd
Mhm.
literally been there for 4 years. I don't know how that works.
Oh,
I
yeah, I know
I
that
don't
too,
know
I've
how
heard it
that
too,
works
but
from
for
all
me,
that I
that's what I
know
do.
fairly, and as far as the IRS is concerned, my understanding is that, yeah, they after 12 months on an assignment, you're considered then a resident, so it's not You shouldn't be getting the tax breaks anymore on the stipends.
Right.
Whatever. Work
Exactly.
that out. We encourage honesty and when dealing with our government and the taxes and the
Mhm.
IRS and all that stuff. And
Yep.
um, we'll have people on here say that they've been someplace for longer, and that's fine and great. But I'm not an expert enough to go into the ins and outs of that. But you're right.
Right. I'm
So
not either,
typically
so
the most I've done is a 3 contract. I've done a 3 contract. So I've been at one hospital 9 months straight.
mhm.
That's the longest stint that I've done at a hospital, at a facility. So
I
it's
do the
worked
same
out
thing.
good for me. Yeah.
I don't stay
Mhm.
any longer than 9 months just because I don't want issue with
Mhm.
the IRS. Now, I may take an assignment elsewhere for 3 months and then come back to that place.
Right.
You can
Right.
do that.
Mhm.
Some people say, "Well, take a 30-day break." I don't know. I've gotten so many different answers from so many
Different
people.
answers. Yeah.
Now,
It's
maybe if you're an
very
accountant or you're married to an accountant, by all means, let us know. Put it in the
yeah.
comments because we don't want to give out wrong information. I'm just
Right.
doing what
Right.
works for me, but we do want to bring you correct information. So
Correct.
that's definitely how it goes. So, and then if you only do one and done and you choose to move on, well, then you got to do all that over again. You got
Mhm.
to find another
Mhm.
assignment, go through all that urine screen, paperwork,
All
finding
that.
another
Yep.
place to live. It
Mhm.
does get daunting, and
It,
believe me, it gets old after a while.
yeah. And remember that references, they typically, I know as far as I know, John, they wanted
Hmm.
references from my current facility. So
Every place does. Yep.
again, guys, maintaining, carrying yourself as a professional, being a professional, forming relationships with your coworkers and those in authority over you, forming relationships with the surgeons. You can
Hmm.
always ask, you could even ask a surgeon to write a letter of a recommendation for you. I have a
Yep.
friend that traveled for years and she had a file full of surgeon recommendation letters just because she
Hmm.
wanted that in her package. So you're going to be using these people as references. So definitely that's a reason to carry yourself well
Hmm.
and have good relationships with the people that are at these facilities that you're traveling at. Keep that in
Yep.
mind too. Yeah.
Yep. And what I would say to that is a lot of times every company does it differently, but my company usually asks for me to pass along this number or this website or whatever to the charge person that's going to give you typically they want a manager to give you a recommendation. So,
Mhm.
but I'll tell you
Mhm.
what I do is I get their information as well. What whether it's their work email address or maybe they want to give you it's what they want to give you.
Mhm.
One nurse wanted me to use her home email address because she didn't want to go through work or her private cell number or just her work number because I've left places and then hey, I can't get a reference from this place. I'll call back
Oh,
and
that's a good
whomever
idea.
answered the phone that day says, "Oh, we don't give references." So now what? Well, so and so said they would. Well, so and so's not here anymore. People do move on as well. So I get that nurse's information or director's information personally if they want to give it to me and I keep it. So then I could
Right.
pass it along to my recruiter. Well, here's her
That's
information,
another very
his
good tip,
information,
John.
whatever.
Very good tip. Yep. Great. I'm
So
glad you
that's
mentioned
another
that.
thing. But we
Yeah.
could this podcast could be 3 hours,
Yeah.
honestly, if we
I hope
gave you
yeah.
every little
I
ins and
I
out.
yeah, I think we've hit on the main things though. I think we've hit on the basics
I
and
think so.
if you are considering being a traveler or just wondering about it, hopefully this episode has made you more aware of some of the ins and outs and just
Hmm.
the basic things you need to know. Um
Yeah,
so I
one thing I
think
would
yeah,
say
yeah.
is, let's say you've always lived in Florida and you thought it might now you've got a career going, you're getting ready to move, and you've always wanted to move to Nebraska or some whatever, name the state, wherever you wanted to move to. Go as a traveler first. See if you like it
Absolutely.
before you pull up
Fantastic
stakes and
way.
just go there willy-nilly like I've done in the past. Just go there, try a travel assignment or two and see if you like the state, like the people. Personally, me, I love traveling to the Midwest. I really do. They are so nice. Not that other parts of the countries aren't nice. I mean, they are, but I mean, let's see. People I've met in New York City are not as nice and kind as people I've met in Michigan or
Mm-hmm.
Ohio or Pennsylvania, just at
Right.
geographic. So,
Yeah.
try that first. Maybe that's an option for you. I don't know. But the world of traveling is wonderful. You'll get a
It
lot of
is. It's
experience. You'll have a
exciting.
lot of great
Yeah.
adventures. You see a lot of great
Mm-hmm.
places. I went to one place I didn't realize that I was just down the street from a place that George Washington had literally built by himself
Mm-hmm.
or Stonewall Jackson's headquarters. I didn't know that. Had such
Oh,
a rich
cool.
history of both the
Yeah.
Revolutionary War and the Civil War right there. It was
Yeah.
beautiful. So
Yeah.
if you're a history buff, you can have at it. There's a lot of great things. Weekend trips. I mean, that's the best
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah. It really
And some
is.
companies
I enjoyed
actually
it.
will give you money for that. I mean, They want
Mhm.
you to post pictures and mention them in social media,
Mhm.
and they give you a certain amount of money for that. It's not much. I
Mhm.
think it's $13 for each one, or I don't remember. It's been so
Mhm.
long. But there are companies out there, and believe me, there are hundreds of travel companies. I
Mhm.
mean, I meet some people and I'm like, "What company are you with?" And I've never heard of them. It's like a really small company. Not that that's not good or bad. That's just saying how many companies are out there.
Yeah, they're everywhere, so it won't be hard to find, that's for sure. Yeah, so good, happy traveling to you. If you have any specific questions for us or,
Mhm.
feel free to ask. And
Yep, drop
we
them in
want
the
to,
comments.
yeah, we want to
We
help
do
you
ask
if
that
we
you like,
can.
comment, and subscribe just because it helps YouTube pick up that algorithm and share our podcast more so we can get
Mm-hmm.
more exposure. We'd like to get this out to all of the surgical assistants that would, like to listen to it and would
Yeah,
consider it a resource. And
sure.
we're always growing and evolving, so we thank you for your
Yes.
support.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. That's going to do it for this episode. We appreciate you and tell somebody about us. Have a
Yes.
good,
Take
good
care. See
day.
you on the next episode. Thank you for joining us today. We invite you to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast. Feel free to look us up on Facebook at The Surgical Assistant Podcast. If you like, you can also email us at thesurgicalassistantpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Content of this podcast is created for surgical assistants and is educational only. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or offer medical advice on surgical conditions. No patient-specific information is shared, and all HIPAA guidelines will be adhered to.